Okay. Um, welcome, friends and comrades. This is going to be the debate questions that were presented to the capitalist parties last night. Here we have Dr. Bill Stodden, who is the presidential candidate for the Socialist Party of the United States, and we have Stephanie Cholensky, who is our candidate for vice president. So what we've decided to do is we're going to go down the questions that that Biden and Trump most certainly generally didn't answer, and provide the answers, that we feel will make this country a better place. So without further ado, before we get started, though, I want both Bill and Stephanie to give a very, very brief.
Oh, looks like we lost Stephanie. Let's go on. She'll come back in.
Yeah, brief introduction, who you are, a little about yourself, and then we will hopefully make that very short, and then we'll jump into it. So go ahead, Bill.
All right, I'll start by saying that I watched the debate twice last night because I'm a masochist like that, and it sort of scratches an itch for me as a political scientist, a person who has an advanced degree in political science. I'm far more qualified just that way than both those two idiots who are up on the stage. But I don't want to dunk on them too much because they're old or they're tied to the capitalist parties. What I will say is that we as socialists definitely have answers to these very pressing topics that are very timely. Some of them are a little bit weird, like what do you feel about Ukraine? Like, I mean, there's one answer that we're going to give, and it's going to be pretty short. I mean, they decided that they wanted to use the time to talk about Palestine, to talk about some other personal grievance. So we're definitely going to try to answer these questions. We're going to answer them from a socialist perspective. We are representing the Socialist Party and the platform of the Socialist Party. So we definitely are going to be speaking from that perspective rather than trying to come up with some kind of like, oh, let's, offer everything to make everyone happy. We need to worry about protecting business and the middle class and blah, blah, blah. We're going to be talking about the working people and the poor in this country primarily. So with that, I look forward to getting the opportunity to answer these questions that the two capitalists did not. Over.
Awesome. Thanks, Bill. And Stephanie, very, very short introduction about yourself, and then we're gonna jump in.
Hi, sorry about that. My cat decided to step in and disconnect me for a moment, but we're good now. I hope you can hear me. My name is Stephanie Cholensky. My pronouns are she, her. I've been a party member since I think about 2001. I served as party chair. I've run a lot of campaigns, funded a lot of locals, been on the Women's Commission, done just about all the work wherever I was needed. I am a libertarian socialist. I do have more anarchist roots. I want to say that Bill and I are actually more qualified to have been at the CNN debate because we actually have our party's nomination, whereas neither Biden nor Trump have that. And according to their charter, or to the debate rules, you had to be eligible to actually win the presidency by being on the ballot enough to actually get the Electoral College, which we probably will not get, but at least we know that we are the candidate. They don't even know that, and honestly, it would probably be prudent for the Democrats to pick someone else, but we know that they are a very broken party, and they're probably not going to do that. So yeah, I'm just really happy. It's really an honor to be able to represent the party like this.
Thanks, comrade. Okay, well, let's get started. The rules that I'm going to use are, I'm not going to give you a time limit, but if it starts going on and on, I'm going to hold up a one finger saying, or a let's bring it in, to make sure that we're not here until tomorrow morning. Anyway, let's get started. The first question for the debates last night was, what do you say to voters who feel that they are worse off economically in 2024 than in 2020?
Well, they are. We've noticed that, while capitalism continues in this country, we've seen something like, I think the figure they quoted last night was like 20% inflation in just cost of living and 30% inflation in housing. The reason why that happens is not because of pandemic spending. It's not because of government stimulus. The reason why that happened is simply because capitalist corporations have decided that they're going to attempt to raise prices, and they're using some future event as an excuse to raise prices. They also intend to make back the money that they had to spend in labor costs to actually get people to come out of their house and like face certain death during the pandemic for some individuals, and so they're getting their money back, and they're making way more. If we really were worried too much about inflation, then we should see inflation across the entire board from the start all the way down to the finish. But we do see all these corporations who are selling us stuff making record profits. They're sitting on mountains and mountains of money. They're paying their CEOs and their stock owners all kinds of dividends, and they're just raking in the dough. And when you think about it, like, what choice do we have in the market? We have to buy food. We can't. If we shop locally, the food is even more expensive than at the Walmart. Well, Walmart is supplied by like a handful of really big food conglomerates, and so they get to set the prices, and we don't really have any say in it. So yeah, that's what I'd say to voters. Yes, the way you resolve that issue is to not continue to vote for the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. They're the people who are permissive, create a permissive environment for this. But by voting for or by supporting something that will fundamentally change the structure and the nature of our economy, in other words, I'm going to say socialism, because I believe that socialism will resolve that problem.
Thank you.
So I was just thinking while Bill was speaking that I realize why they will not ever let us in these debates, because a lot of these questions are just slam dunks for us, because the capitalist system is just so clearly broken, and Americans see that. And the strategy of the ruling class has always been to, at least in the US, to pretend like the only choices we have are between regulated capitalism and less regulated capitalism, which is obviously not the case. These are problems of capitalism, and I want to emphasize that even if Americans are doing well, we are currently still the wealthiest nation on earth, and even if we are doing good, we do that under capitalism. Even if we were to, say, transition to a capitalist welfare state, which is more the Bernie Sanders type Democrat, that's what they push, it would be at the expense of the global South and impoverished nations. We build our wealth off the exploitation of working people and poor nations. So they do not have answers to these questions. People like Obama and Sanders, they may say, they may speak slightly to these problems. They will never offer any revolutionary or like true different solutions. It's always band-aids. It's always reforms that are easily undone, that don't do anything. More often, they just don't do anything. They promise everything and do nothing. Of course, Biden won't even promise anything. They're not going to raise minimum wage. They're not going to do any of that. We know this. Both parties represent the working class. That's what they'll always do. No matter what they say, pay attention to what they actually do. Pay attention, because it isn't just that the Democrats are trying to pass all these even progressive things. They won't even do that. And the Republicans are stopping them. They're not even trying, and they never will. They have decided to be the party of the ruling class and of corporate America. They decided that long ago. They always have been. They just do not have solutions to this. And it is entirely true that people are worse off. It will continue to happen because under capitalism, profits always have to increase. That's just how it is.
Thank you. And a brief follow-up to this, what are the plans? What are your plans if elected or if the revolution comes to address the rising cost of living from our perspective?
Well, one of the things we can definitely do is we can get rid of scarcity in the job market. And I think that one of the best ways we can do that is we talk a lot about a federal jobs guarantee, where everyone is guaranteed the job that they a job that they can make a living on and live relatively well. And that can come in a number of ways. We can either like guarantee a job in law through some act of Congress or something like that, or we can establish something like a national service program, which is something I personally favor, which would allow people to not only pay off student debts within a matter of a couple of years through the national service program, their debt is wiped out, or even use that to support free college, but also to give people like basic skills that are really necessary for getting a good job and doing that. So we could do any combination of a number of things. I really like a federal jobs guarantee. I really like not a living wage, which just allows you to basically make ends meet, but a thriving wage is what we also talk about, which allows us to put back some money maybe for our kids, or put back some money for emergencies or things like that. At the end of the day, we're going to have to talk about a full-on restructuring of the economy. If the revolution was tomorrow, one of the first things we would do is start with a jobs guarantee, and we could do it through something like national service or some other form.
Yeah, and of course, I want to stress we do have solutions to these problems, even under capitalism, even though we do not support capitalism as a system. And obviously, ultimately, we're asked to solve these problems of a system that's broken. We not only have solutions to these problems, but ultimately, we want to move beyond a system where the emphasis is on the profit and wealth of a tiny minority, where workers actually have democratic control of their workplaces, where there is no reason anyone should be in poverty, especially in America. This is a false dilemma. This is something that is created by the owning classes. We have more than enough to go around, but because just a handful of people control almost half the world's wealth, that is why people struggle, even in the U.S. I mean, I don't know what could be a more of a condemnation of capitalism that they can't even make it work in the wealthiest nation on earth. That we have grinding poverty, mass poverty even in the U.S. It's just a broken system, and that's ultimately what we want to move beyond, because we understand that even with reforms, while that may in the short term improve things for the working class, which is what we want, ultimately we want to move beyond this broken system to economy where workers actually have a say, and we have an economy where the well-being of everyone is more important than the private profit of a few.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thanks, comrades. The next question from the debates last night is, how will you ensure a 10% tariff on imports will not drive prices even higher?
A 10% tariff on imports will drive prices higher. So that's just how it has to be. There's some things that we could talk about with protectionism and stuff like that, but as a matter of fact, the tariffs are just that's a good way to raise prices. I know that someone who doesn't really understand how the economy works, like Trump, really supports the tariff. In reality, all that does is raise prices because those corporations pass those tariffs through to the consumer. It's a backdoor sales tax. It doesn't do anything to advance the causes that he is. I'm completely against any tariffs like that.
Absolutely. And you see how they frame the question. They don't ask if we should have the tariff or if the problems that we have are China's fault. They just assume that, and assume that capitalism has the solution, which is just ridiculous. Like he said, tariffs are regressive. They're passed on to the consumer. And our problem isn't China. Our problem is that we have an economic system that robs workers of their of the profits, of the work that they do, the actual value of their work in the form of profit, and can never have full employment. I mean, I could go on and on, but you can't make the system work with little economic tweaks. And most of these economic tweaks are actually just to fill the pockets of the working class. And that's the thing. They claim that they want competition, they want things to be fair, but all the time they're asking for bailouts for the wealthy and subsidies and all these things. I mean, the highest earners, a flat tax at this point would actually be more progressive than what we have, because the highest earners are actually paying a lot less than working people in taxes. So when they offer these solutions, usually it's just either to give American companies an unfair advantage, which if they are actually for free market capitalism, they wouldn't be for. Granted, I'm not for that. I'm just saying that they're hypocritical. Or it's just a giveaway to the wealthy, flat out.
And just to follow up on that, just to say, I agree with Stephanie. We're not for the flat tax either. That's a pretty regressive tax as well. But the idea of taxation is not really necessarily to fund the government. I know that some people seem to think that it is. Well, a lot of people seem to think that it is. But it was when we had a specie-based economy, but we don't. We have a fiat economy now. So taxes themselves don't necessarily fund the government. We basically print money into existence and spend it into existence. But the fact of the matter is that what taxes should be used is for wealth redistribution, but it should be used to pull wealth out of the top, rungs or whatever the economy and bring it down to the working people and the poor through either social spending or direct payments through guaranteed income or something like that. Some way, but it should be used for redistribution of wealth, and that's really what it should be used for. And so that requires necessarily a much heavier burden of the taxation on the top levels of the economy. And when you look at tax burden, 35% tax on the top earners or a 60% tax on the top earners, they're going to still be doing really, really fine. They're going to be doing all right. 60% of $10 million or whatever like that still leaves them with a whole lot of money. But much lower rate of taxation on the lower, so that the tax burden is shared across the entire spectrum rather than just some normal nominal payment.
Definitely. And of course, the ultimate solution is the workers controlling the means of production. That these are temporary things, but ultimately that is our goal.
Yeah, and a very quick follow-up question. Do you think the Dow Jones Industrial Average is a good indicator of the strength of the economy?
No.
I mean, I would say yes with a but. I mean, yes, because when they say the economy, what they really mean is how the wealthy are doing. So if you read it that way, yes, but it's never a good indicator of how the working class is doing, because that is not what Wall Street ever serves.
Right.
Okay. Sorry to throw that one out there. That was mine.
No, it's a good one.
All right. I was ready for it.
Okay. I'm reading this question verbatim. Why should top earners and corporations pay less in taxes than they do now?
Are you serious? Is that really the question? I mean, I watched it. Oh my God.
They shouldn't. They shouldn't pay less than they do now.
More than
that. Stephanie, you were right. The argument is, like with tariffs, the argument is never whether or not we need to raise taxes. It's only about how much we need to lower taxes.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. Biden says he wants to have a wealth tax over $2 million. Do you know how many people in this country make $2 million or more? I mean, it's like a ridiculously small amount of people. And so, yeah, it's very easy to sell that politically because I'm only taxing, a handful of people who are making this fabulous amount of money. But even $1 million is a lot of money. Like the idea that we should have just a wealth tax specifically on wealth, it doesn't go nearly far enough. What you need to do is you need to tax dividends. You need to tax unrealized assets. So people that hold stocks forever, and they only have to pay taxes when they sell the stock. That's capital gains tax. We should tax the portfolios of someone like Elon Musk, who has, $250 billion sitting in some portfolio. We should tax that portfolio as if it is real income. And I know that there's all kinds of arguments about why they don't do that, because when you sell it, blah, 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 but you tax a house while it's sitting there. You tax property while it's there. So why don't they treat assets like they're real estate? It doesn't make any sense to me that we have this system which is so heavily weighted toward those who have so much money and so much power, except for to understand that the wealthy were the ones that wrote the tax code for themselves anyway. If we had that power, I'm sure that workers would get a hell of a lot more out of this society than they currently do. But the fact is that the wealthy people in this country wrote the tax code that benefits them, and under no circumstances are either of these two people going to be addressing that fact or doing anything that actually helps working people or poor people in this country.
Well, if I could go off topic just a tiny bit, one of our campaign members brought up a really good point, which is that Biden's tax plan wouldn't even undo all the Trump tax cuts. And that's how the Democrats, that's why we are where we are. I know a lot of people, well, hopefully we have people that don't necessarily share our views watching this stream, hopefully, are just thinking, yeah, I agree with everything what you're saying, but, Trump is so bad and, we're going to get fascism. Yeah. And so we need to vote for Biden. The problem is the Democrats are why we're here. There has to be some responsibility. If they're the quote unquote left of the US that refuses to take any stances that are even remotely left, they have the responsibility. We have to give credit where credit is due, because they'll say that it is so important to vote blue no matter who, to save us from fascism, to save us from Trump or DeSantis or whoever it is. It doesn't matter. Whoever it is, it's going to be someone different every year. And then they completely refuse to actually push back against these tyrants. And they just keep going farther and farther right. And at the same time, when they're saying that you must support us to stop fascism, and they're not fighting fascism, they're bragging about how they're so bipartisan and they're reaching across the aisle. So you're reaching across the aisle to help the fascists, yet we have to vote for you to stop the fascists. So which is it? Come on. How dumb do you think Americans are?
Very dumb. They think that they're really dumb.
Yes. I had a follow-up question. My follow-up question is completely left my mind, so maybe I'll bring it up later. So the next question, as written, is: as president or vice president, would you block abortion medication?
No, I would expand abortion. Stephanie, I think that maybe you might have some more things to say about this, but I didn't mean to jump in. It was the first thing that came to my mind.
And we need everyone to talk about this. So abortion is healthcare, period. They have no answer to what is supposed to happen with the ectopic pregnancy. When you have a pregnancy that attaches in the fallopian tubes, it is not going to be a viable pregnancy, and it will endanger the health of the mother, if not kill the mother. So what is their solution for that if there's no abortion? That is one reason. There's many reasons, but one reason abortion is healthcare. And if you believe in freedom and just basic civil rights, especially if like conservatives claim they want the government out of our business. When they say business, of course, we know what they mean. It isn't our personal lives, because they really want to be in there. But you shouldn't be regulating our healthcare choices, our family planning choices. And of course, they're not supporting things like school lunches, which we actually did pass here in Minnesota. We have free school lunches now. It wasn't hard and it didn't cost a lot. They don't support things like parental leave. If they really cared about children, just example, every hour of every day in the world, 700 children die of poverty. 700 children every single hour, just because of the poverty caused by capitalism. If they care about children, they would solve poverty, because that is the pressing problem that humanity is facing and children are facing. So yes, of course, it's not the government's business, period, to make those choices. It never should be. And the fact that they're willing to go as far as to push things like banning IVF should be very scary. If you care about your freedoms, I don't care what your political leanings are, you should read what the program for 2025 is by the Heritage Foundation and what the conservatives are actually pushing, because this is what they want to do. And it is scary stuff. And I do sympathize with people who want to vote for Biden just to stop that. The problem is I do not trust the Democrats to stop it. We are here because of the Democrats. I don't know how else to put it. I think people understand that. I understand why people are scared, but that is where we're at. They are looking to completely, we don't have democracy in the US. We have an oligarchy with like a little wiggle room that we can vote for who the ruling party is, as long as they are for the oligarchy. But ultimately, the Democrats and Republicans both support the status quo. They may speak differently on socialist issues and actually believe differently on social issues. But when it comes to the people who are in power and their profits, they don't care. And the Democrats will gladly sacrifice those. That's why they didn't codify Roe. That's why they could have done that. They had a supermajority. They wanted to keep it that way because they need that to keep getting elected, because they don't have any solutions. So obviously, yes, it's a basic human right. I don't know how to put it any simpler.
Just to add on to what Stephanie said, completely agree. I personally am of the position of that there should be abortion on demand for whatever reason. And I remember reading a study recently where someone was talking to women who had received an abortion in their life, who had actually gone out and got an abortion in their life. And it was an analysis of like all the stories that they told about the abortion. And the stories all had a reason why they felt like they needed to use that reason to justify. Look, my abortion was different than the normal abortions, the normal abortions or whatever. My abortion was somehow different because I didn't have a job, or I didn't, I didn't have a stable family situation, or I had 6 kids already, and another pregnancy might kill me, or whatever the reason. There's all these reasons. I would like to get to the point in a society where a woman doesn't have to offer that justification. If I wanted to get sterilized myself, I just go to a urologist and say, look, I want to be snipped. Forgive the candid language, but that's basically the conversation. They would say, you understand this is permanent, it can't be reversed. Yes. You understand what you're doing, you're of sound mind. Yes. And I don't have to like beg the government for permission to do my family planning the way I want to. So why is it that I have, as a man, I have that right, where my running mate has to ask for permission, and if she's like under the age of 18, she's got to get her parents, some of whom are culpable in the pregnancy in the first place, to give permission to have an abortion? Or why does she have to like go through a bunch of hoops? Or why does she have to leave the state? And I know in Minnesota it's not that way, but like if you lived in Texas or some like Alabama or something like that, you'd have to go to a completely different state, or North Dakota for that matter. You'd have to go to a completely different state. And what if you're a person of low income and you don't have the means to travel to another state? What are you supposed to just have the kid? Like, I can make that decision without any problem. And so until women have that same right as me, they should be able to make that decision between them and a consultation with their doctor. We're going to continue to fight for it. And I'm going to say abortion on demand. And, I don't necessarily believe in late-term abortion, but I think late-term abortion is a red herring, because there's not a doctor in the country that will kill a child at 9 months. That's ridiculous. That is a complete lie. And especially what Trump was saying last night, how doctors wait for the baby to be born. And they sit around and look at the baby and like, that is a live human being. Let's strangle it to death. No doctor has ever had that conversation or that inclination, because that very clearly is murder. That's very clearly murder. There's no gray area here. The law said, first trimester, abortion on demand, second trimester for the health of the mother. That's what the law said for 50, like Biden was correct, for 51 years. The law said that. And turning it back to the states means that the law doesn't say that anymore in more than half of the country, because these religious fascists in this country are turning the clock back to when, these like oppressive government systems ruled women's lives and forced women to be broodmares in this country for the state. I mean, that's like Nazi Germany stuff right there. Forgive me for bringing the Nazis in it, but that's what women were for in the Third Reich, to give birth for the Fuhrer. And you can read the propaganda that said that. That's what they want to do in this country. And so we certainly are. I certainly am for abortion on demand. I don't think that women should have to give any reason. I wouldn't expect the doctor to ask me any reason, and if they did, I'd tell them to mind their own damn business. So if I can do that, if I can get away with that, women should be able to do it too. Over.
Yeah, because if the fetus is viable outside the womb, they're just going to induce labor. They're not going to abort. And that is the reality of late-term abortion. It is not infanticide. And the reason they have to push these ridiculous narratives about how everyone who doesn't agree with me is about killing babies is because they don't have a real argument. I mean, the argument that the basic right to bodily sovereignty is something that the government should not infringe in, that's a very popular thing. And Americans consistently, when polled, show that they do support access to abortion. And conservative states need abortion and have abortions just as much as liberal states. It isn't a moral thing, it's a healthcare thing. I mean, yes, I suppose there are some fringe cases of some people who get pregnant, and honestly, I don't know if that even happens, but let's just assume that is. Are you willing to take away the basic freedoms of hundreds of millions of people because of that possibility? I mean, it's ridiculous. They have to make up these completely fantastical allegations to justify their stance, and they're hurting so many people. This doesn't just hurt people who get pregnant; it hurts everybody. I mean, we need this basic freedom. And if you don't like the government, fine. I mean, I agree with you. I definitely am not a fan of the U.S. government. Why are you giving them more power over us? Why would you want that? That's a very personal choice that the pregnant person and the doctor should always be making. And the only way they're able to push this is by making up complete fabrications of what the reality is. Most people who get abortions already have one kid. Over 50% of people who get abortion are already mothers. So these aren't people who just use, what do they say? They say people use abortion as birth control. $700 birth control, really? That doesn't make any sense. These are people who are having abortions for legitimate reasons, and even if they're not, why should the government be making that decision? I mean, you tell me that. It's an important issue, obviously, and both candidates are. I do not trust my body with the government or either candidate. I mean, I would trust it with Bill, but I personally would rather make the decision myself.
Yeah, please do. One thing I'll add to that is the laws that are in our country right now criminalize even women that have to get abortions or DNCs for miscarriages, for like, stillbirth children, or children that are so defective that they're not going to be viable. It criminalizes that, and that legitimately is an issue of women's health that the governments have deliberately criminalized. And so they just want to end, like this baby is never going to turn into a human being, or this fetus is never going to turn into a human being. And so they just want to end the ability of a woman to make the decision for her own health and safety, just because of the fact that they have this moral objection to it. And the moral objection is theirs, believe it or not. It doesn't necessarily always belong to the woman who's having to make the choice whether or not to get her pregnancy terminated. So it's draconian. It's ridiculous.
Thanks, comrades.
Yeah, Tony, right. Abortions and the pill should be free. All medical care should be free. Thank you.
Yes. The next question has kind of been addressed, but I'll ask it again anyway for form's sake. Do you support any legal limits on how late a woman can have an abortion?
No.
I mean, it should not be up to the government to decide that. I think doctors and women are perfectly capable of making that decision. They are perfectly capable of making every other medical decision. So I don't know why this one should be up to the government, unless they do not believe that that women have the mental faculties to make that decision. It's very paternalistic to assume that lawmakers could make a single law that covers every single situation. We all know that isn't true.
Awesome. Thanks, comrades. The next question, on a different subject, is why should voters trust you to solve the immigration crisis?
Why should they trust me to solve the immigration crisis? Because I don't think that we need to have borders. That would resolve the crisis right there. I think we need to tear down the wall. We need to actually what I mentioned last night while we were watching the debate is this is one thing that I actually agree with Ronald Reagan on, and you can cut this into your commercial. Ronald Reagan was right. We do need to tear down that wall. And he very famously said that in Berlin and not Texas, but there are lots of ways that we can deal with the fact that people want to move here, and we got to also deal with the causes of the reason why people are coming here in the first place. If I could get a better job in Mexico than I can get in the United States, man, I'd stay in Mexico because that's where my family is, that's where my culture is, and that's where my heritage is, or wherever. But in a lot of places in Latin America, you're dealing with gangs, you're dealing with corrupt government, you're dealing with a lot of the consequences of U.S. imperialism through the Cold War. That all the chickens are finally coming home to roost, and these people don't feel safe to live in their own houses or their own communities, and so they're fleeing to the north, and that creates a lot of pressure on the border. We can resolve a lot of those problems by creating economic opportunity in those countries and that kind of thing, or we can just do whatever we possibly can to welcome the people who do want to come to the United States, to give them a way to stay here, to give them a way to be productive members of our society and to join our society and that kind of stuff. There's all kinds of ways, but we do know one thing, and I will stress this: when you increase the restrictions that are designed to keep people out of the country, when you increase those laws, those penalties, you actually get more people living in this country illegally. So if you really hate illegal immigration, what you should do is get rid of all of the laws, because that makes it so that people can easily come into the country and work, and then when the season's over or whatever, when they're tired of being here, they can easily go back home because they know that they can come back in whenever they need to. However, when you have all these restrictions that are designed to prevent people from coming to the border, it doesn't stop anyone from coming to the border. It just stops them from leaving because they don't have any confidence that they can get back here when they need to be back here. So they live in the country illegally, in contravention of the law. They hide. They do, and they also don't have any kind of legal protections in the economy at all. So they are exploited, in a lot of ways exploited to death. They're underpaid, or they have their wages robbed constantly by these capitalists. And that's another thing, man. It's really important to point out. These guys don't come here. People from other countries don't necessarily come here all the time, just like on a whim. A lot of people are brought here by our capitalists. I live in Iowa, where there's a huge problem with these slaughterhouses and chicken farms that actually physically import people from Latin America to come work here in Iowa. They do that, and then a lot of times when they get here, they discover that they don't have a job. So now you have a guy with a family who's here from Ecuador, and I'm going to tell you, this is a true story because I know this guy. All right, he lives in this state now. He came up here for a job that he was promised by this slaughterhouse chicken factory. And when he got here, they told him he didn't have any job and he's on his own. He don't have any money. He can't get a job because he's not here legally. And they make it so difficult for this guy to get any kind of help or anything like that. And he's also very fearful of the police, which, for good reason, for darn good reason. And so, what's he supposed to do? What's that guy and his family supposed to do? He's sort of stuck here, and he can't go back home because he doesn't have any money. And that's basically, I think that's what our capitalism causes in this country. That's capitalism. Yep. That's what capitalism creates in this country. It creates that. Can you hear me? I don't know. Can you hear me,
Stephanie?
I can't hear you now.
You hear me? Can you hear me, Steph? Oh, we have technical issues.
You can hear me, but I can't hear you. I don't know.
That's right. Is your speaker off?
It's my computer. Okay, let me try. I'm sorry. I did have a response.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the next question, and then when she comes back in, she can say about immigration. We can circle back. They did that plenty in the debate, so.
Okay.
Oh,
there she is. Can you hear us?
Can you hear us now?
What the heck? I'm gonna try to get my headphones on. I don't know what I did.
All right.
Okay. I'll go ahead with the next question, and then we can circle back because it's also related to related to immigration. Can you hear us, Stephanie? Can you hear us?
No. Nope. Can you hear us now?
Let's see if this works. I don't understand.
Can you hear us now?
Can you guys say something?
Yeah, testing 1 2 1 2.
Hello.
Oh, she might have to reboot. Anyway, go on to the next one. We'll let her back in. Tony, ask her to reboot her computer and come back in. She was having browser problems earlier.
Okay. The next question on the debate is related to the one that you just answered. So it should give Steph an opportunity to come back in when we can get her on. Is will you deport every undocumented immigrant in the U.S. and how? I'm assuming they gave that to Trump.
Yes, they did. As a matter of fact, and his answer was emphatically, yes, I will physically. Well, I'm going to paraphrase. I will physically deport. Well, I can't even do it with a straight face. No, we're not going to deport every undocumented immigrant. We're going to create a pathway, to use the common parlance of our time, for documentation. I think that allowing these individuals to remain undocumented in this country is a great way for capitalists to abuse and exploit them. And so I really believe that, a temporary worker identification card will be helpful as soon as they come in the border. Basically, a cursory security check. If they intend to stay here, start them on the process of getting citizenship. Like, citizenship shouldn't be treated like this golden thing that is so valuable that we have to deny it to everybody and his brother. What we should do is we should allow these individuals who want to stay here in our country to join our society, to integrate to the degree that they're capable of, and then move on. But for those people that want to come here, work, and then go back home, we should also create a pathway for them to do that so that they're protected from these abusive corporations and these abusive employers who simply exploit them and use their labor and then basically turn them over to the INS once they're done. The idea of deporting all these undocumented individuals is not only morally wrong, but it's also practically infeasible. We don't have any idea. They're undocumented, so we don't have any idea where they're at anyway. So just the idea that we could ever even do that is wrong, but I wouldn't support doing that to begin with. So I really, really oppose what Trump had to say on that. Stephanie.
Yeah,
Okay.
And Stephanie, follow up on the last question. I'm going to go ahead and read you the one that Bill just answered, so we're all on the same page. The question was given to Trump, and it said, will you deport every undocumented immigrant in the United States, and how?
Wow. Great segue here is I want to bring up, so he's gotten so far right in the U.S. I mean, we've always been, at least for my lifetime, we've always been a neoliberal hellhole, but they're definitely playing with fascism. The Great Replacement theory seems to be a policy of a large part of the Republican Party now. If you don't know what that is, it is white supremacy, basically. Not basically, it is white supremacy. They will lie and say that undocumented immigrants are committing more crimes. The opposite is true. They actually commit crimes less than native-born Americans. But we are, even if that weren't the case, we are a nation of immigrants. And unless you are a Native American person, you really don't have much to say about this, because this isn't your land ancestrally. This is not a white nation. I certainly hope it never is a white nation, although they're trying to make it so, and have no doubt what that means. We all know where that goes. That is why they're pushing that. They're also pushing this because they know that the catastrophe of climate change is going to drive a lot of migration, and they're trying to get out in front of this. But ultimately, this is a problem of capitalism. The main reason people come to this country from, at least the countries that people like Trump don't want people coming from, primarily from South and Central America, is either because of economic reasons or because of the U.S. foreign policy. And
if capitalists really believe in laissez-faire capitalism, they would also be against borders. They're certainly all about capital flowing freely over borders, but not people. So companies can go to a different country for more favorable tax codes or cheaper labor, but if workers try to follow the better jobs, well, they can't do that because obviously the people making laws want to protect the owning classes and nuts to the working class. But if they were sincere in their policy of the government staying out of these economic issues, they would support open borders, but they're not. They are for ultimately the working class. And here in Minnesota, we've been fighting for something called the North Star Act, which is basically to make Minnesota a sanctuary state. We fought tooth and nail to get even progressive Democrats to support this, and some did. We didn't succeed. I hope we keep trying. Obviously, this is not a long-term solution, but especially for a party that claims to be about family and claims to be about hard work and claims to be Christian, they should be welcoming refugees. They should be welcoming the migrants that come here and work very hard and support our economy. And I just wanted to add a little bit of a tangent. When Reagan gave the speech on Labor Day, where he coined the phrase for his campaign, "Let's make America great again," which Trump borrowed, I guess. I think this illustrates how both parties will say whatever they need to say in order to get elected, but they are always going to support whatever the ruling class needs and wants. He gave that speech, and I would encourage people to actually listen to it, because he said two things make America great: immigrants and unions. I mean, honestly, read his speech. That is what he made clear is what make America great. And that's what Trump is running on, but obviously he has a very different message. And I don't believe, we know that Reagan didn't give a fuck about, didn't care about unions. We know if he supported immigration, it was because he wanted to exploit immigrant labor, not because he was really a big fan of multiculturalism. But it just shows how fraudulent the system is. And obviously it goes without saying, I do not support deporting anyone who is undocumented. I feel they should have voting rights. If they live here, they live here, regardless of where they were born. It's ridiculous. Some of the best Americans are immigrants, quite frankly. And I would challenge people to think of what our country would look like, even if they're, they don't care about other people and they're racist. I would challenge them. What do you think America would look like without immigrants? Like, just think of all the people you meet in your everyday life that do all the work and all the things that make America the best things about our country. I mean, we have a lot of problems, but we have a lot of things to be proud of. And the things that immigrants have done are a lot of the things that we should be proud of.
Thank you very much. Let's see. An interesting follow-up maybe is, what if Trump meant when he said "Make America Great Again," he included both North America and South America, because he would have to actually run on a socialist platform. Sorry, that was. Okay, the next question that was put to the capitalists last night is: Are Russian President Vladimir Putin's demands on ending the Russia-Ukraine war acceptable?
I don't. To be completely honest with you, I don't think it's any of our business. I think we need to stay out of that war, stay far away from that war. Maybe there's a role for Europe to play in that, because Europe will be directly affected by whatever settlement they come to. As far as what we're concerned, we're on the other side of the world, and we shouldn't have been in that war in the first place. I know that we're utilizing Ukraine as a puppet state to fight a proxy war against Russia. I know that there is very legitimate feeling that Russia invaded Ukraine and we got to fight for international norms and all that other stuff. But as a matter of fact, we've sunk, very correctly, Trump said this, more than $200 billion into that war in both money and material. And what have we gotten for it? We've gotten basically a stalemate in that country. It's not going anywhere. Our goal is just to keep the fighting lasting long enough so that Russia will get burned out and run out of resources. It's basically the same plan we had for Afghanistan. But I have a feeling that one way or another, it's going to come to an end someday, and we're not going to get what we want anyway. So I think that we necessarily should get out of that, and we should have never got into it in the first place.
The Socialist Party.
No, that didn't answer that question specifically. Sorry, Stephanie. I didn't know that. I know that didn't answer that question specifically, but I'm going to punt like the candidates always do every single time. I don't think we need to be part of that. I don't think we need to accept Russia.
It was a leading question. It assumes that America should have a pivotal role in every single foreign policy decision, which is just false. You can't be for national sovereignty and also think that the U.S. should be a superpower that serves as the world's police. And every place that the U.S. has dictated its interests, and make no mistake, when we influence foreign policy decisions, it is to protect American interests. I don't think they even lie about that. It is not for the people of Ukraine, who I have a lot of sympathy for, as well as the people of Russia who are suffering under Putin, especially the people who are forced to go fight in that war. And that's bottom line. It's always the working people that die in the capitalist wars. The Socialist Party USA is always on the side of the working class of Russia, of Ukraine, of the US, of Central and South America, of Saudi Arabia, of Israel, of Palestine. We are on the side of the working class. Obviously, we are against apartheid, but we are for the working class, not for either side of the war, which is always any war, but the class war is always going to be fought between two capitalist powers who are representing their own interests, not the interests of the working class of their nation.
Thank you. What about the poor capitalists? How are they going to make money if they can't invest in our war industry?
They'll be all right.
They
just have to pull themselves up by their bootstraps.
Okay. And then the next question was also on foreign policy. What additional leverage will you use to get Hamas and Israel to end the fighting?
I refer you to the campaign statement with regard to Hamas and Palestine and Israel. We don't take Hamas aside. We necessarily take the people, the working people and the suffering people of Palestine side in this conflict. And so the leverage that we would take if, for example, we got elected president somehow, and we had some say in this, was to, number one, cut military aid to Israel immediately and say, look, we're not going to give you guys military aid to use to go and kill those people anymore. Cut monetary aid to the state of Israel and say, look, in order, you guys need to solve this problem. You guys need to solve it cooperatively in a way that recognizes the national desires of the people who lived in this country before you guys got there. This includes right of return from the Palestinians, which is an internationally recognized right, from the UN, from a number of different statements from the UN and various aspects of the of treaties that were signed in the international community. Also, taking like war criminals to the international criminal justice system would be a great way to start working on peace in that area. So with regard to what leverage would we apply to Hamas, I don't necessarily think that the leverage just needs to be applied to Hamas. I think the leverage also needs to be applied to the people we call our allies in that area, which is Israel, because they're the ones that are actually starting the war and prosecuting the war and bombing hospitals and killing children left and right. I think that's where the leverage needs to be applied. And I think that once Palestinians have a viable state of their own, Hamas will sort of be irrelevant at that point. Might be Pollyanna, but whatever.
So historically, I know at least one Socialist Party candidate for president was denied entry to Israel due to our stance and his stance for the self-determination of Palestine. I would see that as a badge of honor if Bill and I were granted that same. I mean, I'm not planning on testing it anytime soon, but I think it will go down in history as atrocious that the genocide that is happening in Gaza was not sufficiently addressed in this debate. I mean, I think that is appalling. I don't know how else to say it. I just really wish there was more I could do, but it shows you that voting for either candidate, I mean, do you want the Democrat genocide or the Republican genocide? I mean, what choice is that? Our media is not speaking truthfully about what's going on there. The fact that equating all Palestine with Hamas is not speaking truthfully. I don't have the words to describe the pain I feel for knowing what's happening there and not being able to do something to stop it. But I see it as a failure of the left. I think we have responsibility in this too, and I think that's why campaigns like this, I mean, not just ours, but any politician that's willing to stand up for what is right and decent. Now, obviously, we are opposed to anti-Semitism. This is opposition to Zionism, not Jews. And of course, the far right constantly delves in anti-Semitic rhetoric. Israel is just a convenient pawn for them. But for peace in that area, I mean, the only solution is one where the rights of all humanity are respected, regardless of their background, religion, race. I mean, that's a very basic thing. And I just wish there was more I could do.
I'll add something else to that real quick. I think sort of a litmus test for the people in power in our country happens to be, will they openly condemn Hamas? And what they're basically saying is, when you ask a question like that, is, do you unequivocally, unquestioningly, irreflexively support the state of Israel? And asking a question, and Stephanie's very correct on this, it was a very leading question because it was designed specifically to trap, I guess, Trump into answering a specific way. I mean, what's he going to say? I mean, he said what we expected him to say, that he said the only way we're going to bring leverage to get Hamas to stop fighting is to kill them all. That's essentially what he said, to basically just level the whole place, kick everyone who's there out of there. That's the way you're going to basically do whatever the state of Israel is planning to do anyway. So he doesn't intend to apply any leverage to Hamas or to get the situation with Hamas resolved. He wants to just do what the state of Israel does, which is basically genocide the whole place. And so framing the question, and this isn't against you, Josh, because I gave you the questions from the debate, but framing the question as what would you do to bring leverage to get Hamas to stop fighting is really just another form of, when did you stop beating your wife? It's like a trick question, that's designed to trap, someone into saying something that might be critical or something of the state of Israel and the policy of the state of Israel. And Trump answered the question exactly as, a group like AIPAC and the government of the state of Israel preferred him to, where Biden, was basically like, I'm with you 99% of the way, but there's that one little thing, because I kind of, it keeps me up, a couple extra minutes at night thinking about the Palestinian children that are being bombed in the hospital. Like, I want to make sure that we stamp the rainbow flag on our 500-pound bombs. We give them, he said, we give them every single thing that they ask for except for 2,000-pound bombs, because we found that 2,000-pound bombs are not discriminatory against civilian targets. But 500-pound bombs are? I mean, I'm a veteran. I was in the military. I've seen 500. No, I shouldn't say that. I felt 500-pound bombs go off from a mile away. All right. I felt the shockwave of those things. I know what they feel like. I know what damage they can do from a mile away. 2,000-pound bombs, 500-pound bombs. What difference does it make? Biden was bragging about that's his whole I support Palestine plank of his platform. That I didn't give Israel more effective tools to murder civilians. So shame on him, and shame on Trump, and shame on the state of Israel. And a person who believes and supports justice, I should say, they cannot possibly stand on any other side than the side of the people, the poor people, the working people of Palestine, who are being bombed and genocided out of existence. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Josh, I know you're part of the Anti-War Commission. I was wondering if you wanted to speak a little bit about that campaign quick.
We're running a little on time. If there's time, I'll do it at the end. And I'm going to ask the next question. And bear in mind that these questions are the ones they ask at the debate. We didn't write it and come up with it, like Bill said. So these are presented as they were presented to the capitalist candidates. So the next question is related, and we probably won't have to spend too much time on this because we've talked about it at length, but would you support the creation of an independent Palestinian state to achieve peace in the region?
Yes, our position is that we support one single Palestinian state in the region, or one single state in the region that is fully democratic, fully secular, and includes all the people that live there without regard to the religion, nationality, ethnicity, that kind of thing. Basically incorporating everybody in the same state. And I know that people will say, well, that puts the Israelites or the Israelis in the minority. And I mean, shit happens, man. I mean, I've been in the minority in this country as a socialist my entire political career. I'm in a political minority for certain. That happens. And what you got to do is you got to find some other way to get votes other than saying, look, I'm an Israeli, look, I'm a Jew, therefore you should vote for me. It has to be something else. The only way you can ever have peace is to recognize the right of those people to live there in their own land, on their own territory, and even, yes, in their own houses that were dispossessed for them over the last, decades. Over.
Yeah, we're opposed to apartheid.
Okay. Okay, and the next question, I'm just going to read it, but it doesn't apply to anybody on this call. What do you say to voters who think you violated your constitutional oath regarding the events on January 6th? Since we did not participate in that in any way, and if there were a leftist largest protest in the city limits of Washington, D.C. that day, we would have been gunned down long before we got to the Capitol. I don't think it's a question that we really have any on there, so I'm going to skip it other than just
I agree with you.
Okay, and this was a question to Trump, and I don't know if it's applicable to us either. Can you clarify what it means when you say it is all right to go after your political opponents?
Well, I think that it is sort of applicable in that if we were elected president, I don't know that I would prefer to allow MAGA to continue to exist in this country, to be completely honest with you. I don't know how I would handle that. I know that there's a big thing about civil liberties and people should have their own rights to decide what their political beliefs are and where they are and everything like that. But having an organized and, yes, armed opposition in the country just seems like a recipe for disaster. I don't know how I'd handle that. I know they're talking about suing them, but
fascism is ultimately opposed to democracy. I'm not going to go into the best way to handle that, but we see that the far right and the far left are treated very differently. They won't let us on the ballot. They don't even act like our positions even exist.
Okay.
Yes, but we don't really owe them a lot, I don't think.
And this is
Yeah.
a question. This is a question that was given to Biden. I think we can briefly answer it though. Do you believe Americans voting for former President Trump are voting against U.S. democracy?
Nope.
I think when either party claims that voting for a third party is throwing your vote away, they are being very anti-democratic. I know that them keeping us off the ballot, that them gerrymandering, that them suppressing voters, sending out false voter information that tells people the elections are a week after when the actual elections are. I mean, they've done so much to undermine democracy. It's hard to even count, but there's a reason we only have two parties, and it's because both parties have colluded to make sure that we don't have any other choice. So they have no room to talk about democracy and protecting it. They have no interest in democracy. They have the interest in preserving the illusion of democracy.
Yeah. It's a very, very lightly, very, very like surface level formality voting is. Serving on juries is more democratic than actually voting. So for them to complain about one party or voting for one capitalist party or the other one undermining democracy is ridiculous, because I think that there's plenty of socialists who will say that our democracy is already gone in this country. There is no real connection between the votes or the opinions of the population and the legislation and policy that happens in the government. On that sense, what difference does it make if a person votes for Trump? They're not voting for or against democracy. It's not going to be any better or worse than what we had, 4 years previous to Biden. So,
and this is not a threat to be taken lightly. There are people who want violent insurrection and actual fascism in the U.S. They see that the neoliberal capitalism is dying, and while they still have their voting base, they want to seize as much power as they can. It is an actual threat, and I don't want to downplay that. All I'm saying is that Biden and the Democrats are not the ones to protect us. And make no mistake, if we were to actually win, if we were actually to build a strong mass pro-worker movement that was opposed to capitalism, they would react violently. I do not condone violence. I condone self-defense, but I want to be peaceful and democratic in every way I can for political change. But I understand that they will not do the same.
When I talk about democracy, I'm talking about, and to keep this brief, what I'm talking about is a more active role for citizens in not only their government and their politics, but also in their economy. We talk about workers' democracy all the time in the Socialist Party. We want to see democracy extended, not just from the voting booth, and that's it, every 2 or 4 years, but also to the places where workers work. So workers should have some control over their economy, have control over the economy. They're the ones with their hands on the levers of the machines. They should be the ones that are making decisions with regard to what they produce, how much they produce, what they sell it for, and that kind of stuff. And it should be in cooperation with consumers and people in the country. That's actual democracy that you can see, that you can feel, that you can participate in, where you can realize your interests are making their way into the policy of your local, your city, your state, and your federal government. What we got in this country right now is it's like a facade of democracy. It's like not even a facade; it's a veneer of a democracy. So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, comrades. The next question, I guess, was given to Biden, but what do you say to Black voters who are disappointed in the progress for their community over the last 4 years? And I personally would say since the 1600s, but they ask about just 4 years.
Well, what I would say is yes, they should be upset because there hasn't been a lot of progress on it. I think that a lot of it has to do with the fact that the government just sort of takes Black voters especially, but also Latino voters and any working class voters for that matter. They sort of take them for granted that they're always going to be turning out for one party or the other, that they don't need to pay any attention to the needs or the demands of this community. I know that in 2020, for forgive me, but Ice Cube, the legendary rapper from LA, said that they need to not support the Democratic Party until the Democratic Party starts giving the Black community or various Black communities across the country some attention and starts paying attention to some of the things that they're asking for. I had a good conversation about reparations at that time, where I learned a lot about reparations for slavery, and I came to a position where I absolutely endorse reparations for slavery, just because there are some individuals in this country that really think that that would go a long way, and they made a very convincing argument to me where I can totally get down with it. It's not a guilt thing. It's not anything like that. What it is a debt that's owed, and I think that that's just one example of a number of policies that the government or any group of people could do if they actually started talking to the members of the Black community, rather than just taking their vote for granted and just assuming that they know what people want. And granted, that's a conversation that's ongoing. And granted, it's also not a monolithic conversation. There's not just one Black community. From my experience, from my understanding, there's not just one. There's as many different interests within that community as there are within my own community. But the thing is that it's important that if we look for a way to bring our society together in a way that it never really has been together, that we start listening and start figuring out what people are asking for, and start figuring out ways that they think would resolve a lot of the concerns that they have about society. And our government isn't doing that at all. Biden isn't doing that. I know that they brag about Black unemployment going down or whatever the case may be, but really that doesn't address a lot of the problems with the individuals who I serve in my community, who are disproportionately, and I say disproportionately, Black or Latino, because we have a very small Black and Latino population in our town. But a lot of the people I see at my own particular place who we offer assistance to are members of the Black community. And nobody's listening to them to find out what they need or what they want, to find out solutions that they might have that might solve these problems. They just sort of take them for granted. And so I think that it's a very reasonable thing for Blacks to be very upset about how the government has treated them for the last 4 years, and as you mentioned, Josh, since the 17th century.
So I'm not going to attempt to speak for Black voters. They can obviously speak for themselves and hold a variety of views. I will please ask if what we're saying resonates with you, please join the Socialist Party. We need you. We need your perspective. We need your leadership. We would love to have you. I've been very active in the Women's Commission, and one thing we have in the party is where we encourage marginalized groups to organize their own liberation, to they make decisions about our platform for the things that affect them, and we take leadership from the Black community on what our policies towards the Black community should be, which should be, a given, but. I will say nothing is going to change until we change the material conditions. One example is the housing recession. It wiped out half of all Black family wealth, gone in 2008. That is a ridiculous setback. The playing field is not even if there were no racism, if it just disappeared overnight, the economic disparities would be obscene. And I really would have to ask anyone who believes we live in a meritocracy, do you honestly, if you believe that America is truly a meritocracy, do you honestly believe that white cishet men are just better at everything and that's why they have all the wealth and power, or what is it exactly? Because the disparities definitely are there. So I wanted to know what the solutions are. And I don't really jive with identity politics. It is important to discuss these issues, but that's not the end all be all of what a person is and what they believe, obviously. And ultimately, we always have to bring class into this, because let's face it, we are living under a capitalist society where a small group of people have all the power, and that shapes everything. I'm not claiming to have the answers, but I'm definitely willing to listen.
Okay. And a quick follow-up question that's somewhat related that's not from them, it's from me. Is it possible to have a meritocracy and not tax inheritance at 100%?
Absolutely not. Of course not. It's ridiculous.
No, yeah, I think that the inheritance is a way that they pass wealth down from generation to generation. If you inherit the wealth, what did you do to earn it? There's the merit in that sense is that you simply had the luck to be born into a family that already had wealth. There's no merit. Those two things are counterintuitive. Those two things, meritocracy and inheritance. I would say tax inheritance. I would say actually not tax inheritance at 100%. I would say, nationalize inheritance, distribute it amongst the community, because that inheritance was, I'm going to say this and it might get me in trouble, but I really firmly believe that inheritance was never gained like illicitly. Like if you have millions and millions and millions of dollars, you didn't work for that money unless you were a drug dealer or a drug kingpin, I guess, and you somehow managed to squirrel away millions and millions of dollars. Otherwise, you got that money from cheating workers out of their labor and skimming off the system. So, yeah, don't even tax it at 100%. Just nationalize it and just distribute it back to the people who you stole it from.
Very good, very good. The next question from the debate was, assuming to Trump, will you take any action to slow the climate crisis?
Yes, I think nationalizing the Fortune 500 would be a great start. The biggest corporations in the country are some of the biggest polluters as well, and no one's really even discussing that. They're suggesting that we recycle our plastic bottles to solve the climate crisis. I think that what you got to do is you got to get capitalism under control, because capitalism is what's driving the pollution in the first place. And once we get rid of capitalism, I'm not saying that climate will be solved, but I'm saying that's a good first step, because you are stopping the majority of the pollution. And, in with that, drilling for fossil fuels and this kind of stuff, all that's got to stop. And we got to start focusing on more sustainable forms of energy. Even if we want to keep energy, we got to make it more sustainable. Some people might prefer to go back to the Stone Age. Not me. I like having computers and electricity at night, but we do have to find a way to make our uses of our resources more sustainable and less destructive to the planet.
I mean, there's so much I could say about this. We have an eco-socialism committee in the party, and they have a lot that are informed opinions on this, and I would prefer to defer to them as far as policy, but I will say that capitalism is incapable of solving this problem. It simply can't do degrowth. It is always only concerned for profit. It will always be exploiting resources for profit. It never, it takes the external costs of environmental destruction, and it doesn't factor those in. That's why they are constantly strip mining the planet. And the truth of the matter is, things are going to change. This is not sustainable. We cannot continue on the path. The only question we have is whether when the Earth collapses, if humanity is going to go with that collapse. Are we going to prepare for what's going to happen, or are we going to continue business as usual? And I think especially younger generations, they see this, and they need leaders like us, and they need to step up and become leaders dedicated to a different way and a revolutionary solution that doesn't involve business as usual.
Awesome. That was the only question for the climate, which is the greatest existential threat to humanity that the moderator
didn't even answer it. They didn't even answer it.
Yeah. Anyway, the next question is, and we're getting close to the end, folks, so bear with us. Will you name one specific step that you will take to ensure Social Security remains solvent?
Well, one specific step I would take would be to get rid of the cap for high income earners. Right now, there's a cap on your income, that after that particular cap, and I'm trying to remember if it's $250,000 or $100,000, I think it's $250,000. After that cap, you don't pay any more in Social Security. So you can theoretically make $700 billion or whatever and not pay any Social Security tax on everything from 250,000 to 700 billion. Let me check the comments. Maybe they know what the number is. Yeah, the
number is important.
Well, whatever the cap is, I'd get rid of the cap, and so these people would pay money. But I also know this, that we have a fiat currency, and literally the government could print all of the money that it needed to keep Social Security solvent. So that might even be the easier solution. Say, what do we need to make Social Security solvent into the infinite? Okay, here is a whatever that number is dollar bill. Here you go, deposited in the lockbox, and then you have Social Security solvent for another 50 years. However it is, but really you don't even need to print the bill. You just need to add a couple numbers to the bank account, to the Social Security bank account, and voila, there the money is. That's how it happens in a very realistic sort of way. But, in terms of policy, since we seem to believe that taxing funds all of our programs, I would get rid of the cap for high income. Make Social Security payable by all. I wouldn't raise the age. I think we need to lower the age actually to make it so that people can retire earlier, enjoy more of their life without being forced to work. I'd raise the benefits and index them to the cost of living wherever you're at. Those are very specific steps that we could take to make it solvent. And I would also, I'm not in favor of means testing universal programs. But there are some people who the way you calculate how Social Security is paid out, I could work for basically nothing. I could get 20 years of making $50. And then if I get a job that pays me $3 billion a year for my last 10 years, I get paid Social Security based on that last 10 years of working, not the 40 years that I did before. And I didn't pay anything into the system. And so if we're going to maintain this facade that our taxes fund the system, I'd make it so that people who, that you get Social Security based on what it costs to live rather than what you earned. I'd make it based on cost of living rather than what you earned. That means that if you have a lavish $3 billion lifestyle, Social Security ain't going to fund that. Social Security is going to fund your cost of living. Over.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is I think we need to get rid of this idea that Social Security is doomed. They want to push this because they want people, especially younger people, not to kind of accept that Social Security won't be a thing. Right. I would encourage younger people to fight tooth and nail for every entitlement and every program that helps you. Don't just assume that we can't afford it. If we're going to defund anything, let's defund our military, because that's where most of our discretionary spending goes. Let's fund social programs.
And I'd even be in favor of changing Social Security out for an actual, explicit pension system, where you work a certain number of years and you just get a pension. I would even be in favor of cutting the Social Security tax altogether and just having a national pension system. But I think that may be a little bit too crazy radical for this country to think that that our society should take care of old people. So if we're stuck with Social Security, those are ways we can save it.
Okay. Okay, the next question, I believe, was given to both, and neither one of them answered it. What would you do to make childcare more affordable?
Free childcare, free pre-K through college education for individuals, free childcare for those families that are working families who need it. And basically, I would dramatically expand the childcare facilities and funding in the society to open facilities where there aren't facilities, to make it affordable for everyone who lives in that, in those areas. Right now, childcare is so expensive that a lot of times childcare for two individuals is, as they mentioned last night on the debates, more than someone's rent. That's obscene. It really denies families the opportunity to raise their kids properly, to work. I'd have expanded paternal leave or maternal leave after a child is born, so the parents can actually have more time to bond with the child. Fully funded, by the way. These are things that I would do to increase childcare.
I mean, I don't have much to add. Bill went over our platform very well, but I will say it is absolutely disgraceful that any party could claim to be the party of family values and actually has policies that force people to have a family against their will, yet are not willing to support basic things that just about every other country provides for, like education and childcare for all. There is absolutely no reason we shouldn't do this.
And it's really interesting. One more thing I'll say about this, that we were able to answer this question in just a couple minutes, and yet they couldn't get them to answer it, even though they asked them 4 times about it.
Because they don't care about it. They really don't.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you think the per child school lunch debt limit should be? I'm just kidding. Like, we should not have, there should not be such thing as student lunch debt.
Didn't Ted Cruz say something about that feeding free school lunches kill the soul of children? They feed their belly, but it kills their soul. I mean,
well, I do know that the governor of the state of Iowa said that giving kids SNAP benefits over the summertime creates childhood obesity. So in order to fight childhood obesity, we need to cut SNAP for children over the summer.
Yeah,
that's the Republican Party that does that, right? You can't. Yeah, right. You just need to let these poor people die on the streets.
Free school lunches were implemented by the Black Panther Party. It was a far left Marxist program to begin with, because all great ideas that help workers always come from the far left.
Yeah. Okay, we're getting close to the end, y'all. What do you do to help Americans struggling with opioid addiction? What will you do?
Yeah. Well, not only free healthcare for people who are working to get off of opioids, but also free healthcare for everyone, and good jobs, because a lot of times economic desperation is what drives drug addiction in a lot of communities. So having good jobs and having hope and that kind of thing will not only cut down on this, but also there has to be a market focus as well, in that we need to go after the companies that are creating opioids and selling them by the boatload for profit, and killing whole communities and getting them addicted on these horrible drugs for the sake of profit. Like, we know what opium does. We know that we've known it for years, and drugs that are derived from opium, we also understand what that does. We know what fentanyl does and this kind of stuff. And really, the reason why a lot of people are dying is because those drugs have been pushed in our community by American capitalists for decades and have been overprescribed. Have been, doctors have an incentive to overprescribe them. Drug companies have an incentive to create them, and it's not. I know that they wanted to say it was all Mexico, but it's really not. It's American drug companies that are pushing this. It's American drug companies that are profiting off of this, and those people got to be dealt with. If we want to ever even touch the opioid crisis, we got to cut it at the supply, and also deal with the effects of opioid addiction with free healthcare for all those people who are addicted to it, and free healthcare just all around.
Drug addiction is ultimately, it is a healthcare issue. It is not a crime issue. We need to end the war on drugs. We need to hold the drug manufacturers that did orchestrate this by claiming that OxyContin was not addictive, by all sorts of things that they did to get doctors to overprescribe them. I mean, we shouldn't have advertising for drugs, for starters. We shouldn't have a for-profit pharmaceutical industry or a for-profit healthcare industry. But the communities that were worst affected by this were Rust Belt communities that were devastated by things like offshoring. I mean, truth is, when people don't have opportunities, when they don't have mental health care, they do turn to ways to self-medicate. And one reason Rust Belt communities were hit so hard is because so many people had been doing repetitive, physically intensive jobs, and they did have chronic pain. And unfortunately, there isn't a lot of ways to treat that. And I think we should go after the companies that cause these chronic health conditions from their occupations as well. But people with addiction are facing a health crisis. They're not criminals. They should be treated with compassion, and that doesn't just benefit them, it benefits their families and their entire communities. But they don't want that because we have a for-profit prison industry that profits from locking them up.
And one other thing, one of the viewers mentioned this, and I absolutely agree with this. Part of the reason why people don't seek treatment for things is because our drug addiction is criminalized in this country. So what we need to also do is work on a policy of decriminalizing drugs and destigmatizing addiction to drugs and making it, as Stephanie mentioned, a health issue rather than an issue for the law to criminalize people and put people in jail because they're addicted to drugs.
We know this policy works. We've seen other countries implement it.
Yes. Okay, we've got a couple more questions, and then I've got a couple at the end. The next one is, how do you address concerns about your ability to serve as president at your age?
I'm a strapping young 47-year-old, so you might say, because 47 is a prime number. Here's a little math joke. I'm in my prime. I don't think that my age will really be a factor. I'm not. I'm not Joe Biden for crying out loud. That guy's pretty old. But not to say anything about old people. I mean, old people have a lot of wisdom that they can impart, but I don't think my age is going to have any effect one way or another about whether or not I'm able to serve.
I might have given my age away just by how long I've been in the party, but I'd be curious how old people think I am. Ultimately, it is a problem that not only that all our Congress people are millionaires, but they are of one specific generation. And if you truly believe in democracy, that is simply not right. We do need new voices in politics, and one reason that we're not getting new policy solutions that actually make sense. And I mean, you saw how out of touch both of them were. I actually do aging research as a biochemist. I don't do clinicals, and I'm not claiming I can diagnose anyone. So I do understand how detrimental mental decline can be. But let's just assume that's not even a thing. They can't represent most Americans. They simply can't, especially when all of Congress is the same age. We need fresh blood. We need new ideas. And one reason we don't have that is because if you talk to young people, they're a lot more skeptical of capitalism, and of course they don't want to bring that question up. So I mean, it is a problem that so many of our representatives are of a certain age, even if they're not facing mental decline. It just simply is not representative of America.
And one other thing, what we need fresh blood. We also need people who actually have to deal with the consequences of the decisions that they make. Because let's be honest, someone who's 80 years old is going to die within the next 10 to 15 years, statistically speaking. So if they start a war, we're going to be living with that for the next 50 years while they're going to be safely implanted in the ground, to be crass about it.
Good band.
Yep. Thanks, comrades. And the last question from the debate is, will you accept the results of the 2024 election and say that political violence is unacceptable?
I'm going to have to accept the results of the 2024 election because I don't really have any control over it. But as with regard to political violence, I'm a revolutionary. In the famous words of Fred Hampton Jr., I am a revolutionary. And part of that is accepting the greater than zero probability of political violence. And one thing we say about political violence is political violence always comes to us from the ruling class, who is attempting to stop any forward motion of the forward progress of the people. And so, do I say it's unacceptable? I say it's unacceptable when it's delivered to me by the ruling class, which it will be. But do I say it's unacceptable if people fight back and fight for self-defense? I'm not going to say that. If people are utilizing that in self-defense, That's what's got to be done, and that might be what needs to happen to make change, because it ain't going to happen in a system that's permanently rigged against any sort of change happening in peaceful ways. So it is what it is. I can't say that it's unacceptable because it might be necessary.
I mean, one reason, at least personally, I do this is because I do want change without violence. And it is hard work, especially because I know who violence tends to hurt the most. But truth be told, we aren't going to have change without that threat, unfortunately. My hope is that we can maybe have the threat, but do it peacefully. I would be very disturbed if we had a revolution at this moment, honestly, because I'm not speaking for the party. This is my personal opinion. I do not believe that the working class in the U.S. has the capacity to actually build a socialist state at this point, because they just do not have the class consciousness to do that. I want to build that. I want to build solidarity amongst all types of working people. But truth be told, if we were to have a revolution tomorrow, it would likely be a fascist one, or fascists would end up co-opting it. And that is something I think the left needs to grapple with, honestly, because we are facing a collapsing system, and revolution as well. You know, we do see our institutions being strip mined, and change is going to come. I'm hoping that by keeping the solutions we have alive, that we enable a new world that is peaceful and prosperous and just and fair without that. But I am realistic in that they're probably not going to allow that. But you know, there is a better way, and we can get it without violence. Whether that's likely, unfortunately, probably not.
Okay, thanks, comrades. That is all the questions that were asked to the debate. I have a couple. The first one should be really easy for us socialists, and the second one would probably take some thought. The first one is, does any government, whether the federal government, the state government, or the local government, have any obligation to support, protect, and enrich business? Is it the responsibility of the state to make sure that business, and when I say business, the owning class, do we have any responsibility to enrich them, especially vis-a-vis the working class? Is when people say business needs a seat at the table, do they really? In a government, is it?
Private property does not need a seat at the table. I think that if we nationalized or socialized our industries, I would certainly hope that government would do what it can to protect those industries from capitalists who are trying to seize them back. But under our current structure, I would say no. I don't really care about the interests of business. I'm interested in what the workers are doing, and if it's worker owned, that might be a different story. But we don't have a lot of those in this country.
Yeah, I meant private businesses. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
private property, no.
In our current system, again, it might be different if we actually had democratic control of the workplace and the workers control the means of production. But businesses under our current system exist only to profit, period. They do not exist to help anyone except for the shareholders, and they will do that at any cost. So I really like this question, because it's such an assumption that should be the role of government, when it's actually the opposite of what laissez-faire capitalism is supposed to be. It's supposed to just, that's what it means, leave alone. You're not supposed to be interfering with companies. You're supposed to let the ones that aren't competitive die. You're not supposed to bail them out. But of course, they're hypocrites. They are for the ruling class, not even necessarily for capitalism, although capitalism is the system that allows the ruling class to be perpetuated, obviously. But no, we should be, one of our parties saying is profit. We want people over profits, because there's no inherent value of a so-called job creator. That's just someone who exploits workers for profit. Why should we be on their side? We should be on the side of the hardworking people that actually make all the great things in the world. I mean, all the riches of the world were created by us workers. We do have a right to them. And the government, any just government, shouldn't take the role in robbing us of those.
Yeah, and a brief follow-up to this before I ask my next question, which will be the last one, comrades. Would one of y'all be willing to explain the difference between personal property, public property, and private property? Just so when people hear socialists say that private property is something that shouldn't exist, we need to explain what we mean by that. So if we can explain the difference between personal property, private property, and public property.
Socially speaking, personal property is a thing that you have exclusive use of. It's for your own use, i.e. your toothbrush or your car. Your automobile is personal property until you start utilizing that to generate profit. Once you start utilizing that thing to generate profit, it stops being personal property and starts being private property. Private property is necessarily some form of capital that you own that you utilize in order to generate wealth for yourself. House investments or interests in a firm or something like that is considered private property. Owning a factory, owning the machines at the factory, those are considered private property. Those are for the enrichment of yourself. They're not just for personal use. Like if you use a toothbrush 80 times or whatever, you're gonna have to throw it away. The value of that thing is gone after it's gone through use. If you use a company 80 times, you just generate wealth. That's the difference between personal and private property. So when we say we're here to take private property, I'm never coming for someone's toothbrush. I'm never coming for their underwear or whatever. Those are personal property. Those are things the value of which is expended by use. With private property, you're not in that situation. You're utilizing that to generate more wealth and create more value.
But workers create the wealth, not the company.
Well, yes, I understand that. But what I'm saying is workers create the wealth for the person that owns the private property. Yeah. So in the instance of that I'm utilizing my car to give taxi rides or whatever, I'm utilizing my capital for me. I might be the worker, but I own that car. I own that property. I'm utilizing it for my own enrichment. Stephanie's right. The workers are the ones that create the wealth in a factory, and their labor adds value to material. That's the fairly standard Marxist understanding of that. But personal property doesn't work like that, because it doesn't matter what it is. The use of that thing is going to be exhausted by the value of that thing is going to be exhausted by the use of it. Public property is where that property is owned and operated either by the state or what we would refer by the people who actually use it. That's, I suppose, the difference between nationalization and socialization, where the society owns the property and utilizes it for the benefit of the society. Capitalism is opposed to socialism, because in socialism, the society owns the thing and utilizes it for its benefit. In capitalism, the capitalist owns the thing and utilizes it for its benefit. But at the end of the day, you're utilizing it for the benefit of the society, and that public property is just something that the society or the nation or whatever owns. Your toothbrush would never fall under public property, hopefully, because that would be kind of weird. But an apartment building might.
We shared toothbrushes, but that was just us being kind of weird crust punks.
That's weird. Nothing against crust punks, but that's kind of strange.
Yeah.
Stephanie, if you want to add anything to that, I'm sure that you probably have perspectives on it as well.
Matt said in the chat that through the exploitation of labor or the rents therefrom, though, Uber drivers' cars are still personal property. If you're reusing your car to pick stuff up, it's still your car.
Yeah, that's one way. Another way they screw over workers. I also want to mention that Adam Smith also believes that wealth was created by workers. It isn't just socialists and Marxists that believe that.
Yeah,
very well.
If you're provided a car,
but the Uber driver's car is utilized to make profit for Uber, because Uber is exploiting the labor of the worker who's driving the car.
But unless Uber is providing the car, though, like it's just straight up exploitation.
Yeah.
Like if you drive for Uber, we're not coming for your car, is what I'm saying. Unless it's like a cab where it's owned by, if the car was owned by Uber, then yeah, that's fair game. But
we'd be expropriating Uber, not necessarily a person's individual automobile.
Right.
Well, the gig economy found a new way, well, not necessarily a new way, but another way to exploit workers where the workers technically own the means of production in I guess in their car, but they have to pay for, they're paying for the mileage and the insurance and everything. The company benefits from that property, but they don't actually have to care for it or maintain it. So it's just another cost that is getting passed on to the employee that isn't accounted for, whereas the company is getting profit without having to maintain that overhead.
Right. Yeah, the company is just skimming. That's literally all it's doing. It's skimming. Because it doesn't, like, the dude who owns Uber isn't ever driving your car. They're never performing any of the labor. They're just skimming money off the ride you get.
I'm not saying it isn't. I thought I said it's the means of production, not capital. Didn't I?
Means of production. Yeah, a car is a means of production.
I'm pretty sure.
Anyway,
I'm pretty sure that it's the worker owning the means of production, but not profiting from it. Maybe if I said capital, then I misspoke.
This is higher level. I might have said capital. Anyway, Josh, go on with your next question.
Okay. One last question. And this has come up recently, especially in the cities. I'm assuming it's happening in the rural areas. I know it's definitely happening in the rural areas around large cities. Has to do with large-scale gentrification, private companies buying up housing stock to create rent farms, and leaving workers in a situation to where if you work a job at the minimum wage, that it's almost impossible to afford housing in the area. What could we as socialists do in order to ensure that people that work in a place can afford to live comfortably in a place? And how high a priority should housing be for the national government, for the state governments, and for local governments?
Oh, can I start?
Go ahead.
Well, I want to say one reason the wealth lost during the last crisis, and of course capitalism is always going to be a cycle of crises. The main way that working people can build wealth is through home ownership. And what we're seeing now is private equity firms are buying up all the housing stock to the point where, I mean, there's places where actual homeowners can't even buy a house because the private equity firm will come in and pay like huge amounts of cash for these houses and just swipe them all up. And it's pretty obvious what they're wanting to do. They want to eliminate one of the last ways that working people have to actually build any personal wealth. And I'm not necessarily opposed to people having some personal wealth in the form of stability. I'm against people hoarding that wealth and using it to exploit others and using it to control our political system. But, having your own house and having equity is not wrong in and of itself. But I mean, they want a nation of renters that are dependent on them. They're taking away one of the last ways we have any kind of financial security as working people. And the only thing we're going to have left is, even in old age, when we can't sell our labor anymore, is, well, nothing. Just if we have anything saved up, then that's great. But all we will have is our ability to sell our labor at that point.
If I had my druthers and we lived in, Bill Stodden, Socialist Republic, whatever, I would make all houses public housing. I hear what Stephanie's saying about the need to generate or to be able to build wealth in your housing and that kind of stuff. But I really think that people have been utilizing their houses, as cash machines for so long. And I think that, all that does is drive the price of housing well past the ability of anyone in our society's ability to acquire it. And, when you value land or value property based on what your neighbor sold their house for last, there's something wrong with that. When you utilize property taxes to fund things like schools, and people want to live in, these really high value neighborhoods, and they have better schools or whatever, there's something really wrong with that. And I think that it also excludes a lot of people from ever having any kind of security in their home, because we are at the mercy of private landlords that are there simply to extract every single little cent of value out of the home that you live in. I think that, the best way to keep people from ever being home insecure is by making all housing public. And I don't know how far that would fly in this country. Of course, this is, my crazy wet dream that I would like to see someday, that to have basically all the things you need to live a decent life not cost you an arm and a leg to acquire. Like, we shouldn't have to, work ourselves to death just to pay our bills. And housing is part of that. Yeah, whether or not you own it or whether you rent, it's still a huge chunk of your income. And so, I don't know. I think that in the ideal scenario, nobody would need to pay a bank for their house. Nobody would need to pay a landlord for the place that they lived. I think that there's something, just in my mind, there's something fundamentally immoral about having to pay just for the privilege of living and being warm in the wintertime.
Yeah, well, just the concept that one person can own and control this one parcel of land is counterintuitive to me. I just want to clarify. I'm talking a bit more about short term as far as what's being taken away from us. Long term solutions, I would prefer more public control of land. The idea that someone can just control this land and it's a libertarian fantasy that everyone's going to have their own little piece of property and that's what's going to make them free. But for some reason, it's not going to descend into this fiefdom of warlords. It's just, it doesn't make any sense if you think about it, honestly.
Okay, comrades. Well, I want to make a brief statement before we end, and it is: smoking is not cool. I smoke because I'm addicted to cigarettes. It is gonna kill me, and probably kill me young. So if you're watching this, and obviously I'm not super cool, so I'm not really an influencer that way. But if you don't smoke, don't start. If you don't vape, don't start. But let's not tell people that they're bad or faulty because they've gotten addicted to any substance. It is a medical thing. I figured I'd throw that out here because I've been chain smoking through this whole thing, and I don't want you to think that think everybody should be, giving themselves lung cancer.
This has been a very special episode of the Socialist Debate Response.
I feel bad because I don't vape because I'm addicted.
Well, I absolutely love smoking, and I will rest on Mark Twain's statement on smoking. The single best part about quitting using tobacco is the sheer unadulterated pleasure of taking it back up again.
I will say, if you're a fascist, smoke every single day. It's totally cool. But if not, we need you. Please do not, especially you, Joshua. Just closing, I just want to remind people that there really are solutions to these problems. I know they seem very overwhelming, but the reason for that may be because you've been sold a bill of goods that the only choices we have are what type of capitalism we're going to have. And anything that involves a system where the people in power don't have all the wealth and power, any alternative is chaos. They're telling you that for a reason. So please think about that and think about some of the things you've been told about socialism. It isn't a totalitarian state controlling every aspect of your life. Like, I don't know whether you stay pregnant or not. It is about expanding democracy, and one of the things that makes the Socialist Party unique is we are socialism from below, grassroots organization. We are multi-tendency. I realize not everyone agrees with this. This might not be your thing, but I think it's a good system. I think it's the way we're going to achieve change in the world, because the working class itself is a multi-tendency group, and there is a better way. We can do this. There definitely is hope. So please do not give up, because if you do that, you're letting the bastards win.
And Matt said in the chat that we want more democracy, not less. I will echo that and amplify it and say we want real democracy with substance, where people actually feel like they, not feel like, where people actually do have control over the various aspects of our society, to include things like our economy. We're talking about economic democracy. We want people to have control over their economy and the costs and the means by which they live. We want people to have control over their government, where we know that it's not just a bunch of oligarchs making a bunch of decisions that we have no input on, but where we know that if we cast a vote, the vote actually means something. It actually elects the people with the policies that we support, or we actually have the opportunity to participate in government in a very real and meaningful and actually literal way, as opposed to simply pulling a lever or using a pencil on a piece of paper every 4 years. So, yeah, I think that that's what we're about. And if you like that, I suppose you will want to know how to get a hold of us. And so I'd invite you to check us out on SPUSA2024.org and also everywhere around the internet. You're probably watching us on our Facebook, SPUSA2024. And if you use Twitter or X, I guess they call it, we're also there at 2024, SPUSA2024. Send us an email, let us know what you think.
Yeah. Well, thanks, comrades. And I'm going to make a plug right at the end. Every Thursday we do book studies. We vote on the books and we do it. If you're interested, you can register at leftunitystudy.com. We'd love to have you. We are currently doing Palestine, a Socialist Introduction, and following this book, we will be doing Imperialism, the Highest Form of Capitalism by Lenin. And then even if you don't agree with the text, we are there for discussion. So that's how we roll. And the second thing is, the anti-war working group is trying to do a social media campaign. And the goal is to get with somebody else and make a short video basically saying, hi, my name is Josh, I'm from the Socialist Party, or insert your name or organization behind it, and say something like, regardless of whether it's in the Sudan, whether it's in Yemen, whether it's in the Congo, or whether it's in occupied Palestine, we are united against genocide. Because on the left, if you're a left, kind of being in the left should say that you are really not down with genocide. So, and then if you'll just make a short video, post it to your social media, and use the hashtag United Against Genocide, that would be great. And thanks, comrades. This has been the follow-up debate from the debate, from the very grumpy, almost dead, or certainly demagogically minded capitalist parties. We hope to see you on more stuff. Like Bill said, SPUSA 2024, or you can find the information on the party at Socialist Party USA.net.
Yeah, right? Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, comrades. Stay strong. Solidarity.
Oh, thank you. I think we're still live.
Okay.
Tony's got to get us out of here.